When Meem arrived in Santa Fe, it was a dusty and dying town. It had lost population since the train had passed it by. You can see from these images that much of the architecture was Victorian, some brick streets, and transitioning from horses to automobiles. On the upper left, you can see the plaza, the center of town on the right. Below is an image of the vernacular architecture, a two-room adobe house, simply built. Someone in the front yard, and in the background, a house in the Victorian style up on the hill, still existing. Much was changing. There were still commerce and cultural institutions on the plaza, such as the church and the state capitol.
Gayla, can you speak up a little bit?
More louder, okay?
Louder.
And an influx
There
of
is no microphone.
An influx of Americans from the United States saw the potential of the Southwest archaeological discoveries. Now Santa Fe would be energized by the tourist trade for itself and the nearby pueblos. John Meem had arrived at the energetic beginning of making Santa Fe a tourist town. This is a photograph that my great-grandfather Evie Harris took in 1914 of my grandmother and her siblings looking up towards Sun and Moon Mountains. One can see the architecture on the right that's already Spanish Pueblo revival with the undulating parapets, and on the left, bungalow-style houses with picket fences and new electricity lines. In 1912, also the year New Mexico joined the United States, the city of Santa Fe had many players that came together to save old Santa Fe from the American imported architecture as seen here. This mostly Anglo set of newcomers mixed with some of the local Hispanic politicians to create the Santa Fe style and amplify the native and Hispanic cultures. Some of these people were Carlos Vieira, Sylvanus Morley, Edgar Lee Hewitt, Arthur Seligman, Henry Dorman, and Jesse Nussbaum. It was also accepted by the artists that had already arrived in Towson, Santa Fe, a style they found on the Spanish colonial churches at the Pueblos, and ultimately created by the architects, as Mary mentioned, Rapid Rap in Colorado. As one of them said, Santa Fe is the pleasantest place in New Mexico to live. As a residence and health resort, it would grow. It needs only to be known to be appreciated. They wanted no more imported styles, but wanted to save the heritage of antiquity, saving the great edifices. Later, Meem will play a huge part in saving the setting for those edifices. This is the Sanborn Insurance map of 1920 when Meem arrived, which shows how compact it still was. On the lower right is the Sunmount Sanatorium where he lived, showing the tents that he slept in. It was quite a distance from the downtown plaza at that time, but the plaza was still the center of commerce, the cathedral, and the recently renovated Palace of the Governors, all in the plaza. At the lower left in that map is also the prison and the rail yard. Today we might call this kind of tourism eco-archaeological. There was adventure, there were a few rules. Women could direct their destiny in a way they could not back east. This frontier American West was hard to get to. You had to journey first by train, then horseback, then cars, and there were few cars. Previously, Santa Fe and Taos had been discovered by the New York artists, including George O'Keeffe. Santa Fe was romantic for people coming from New York City and points east especially. I include the painting on the left by Dorothy Brett of Taos Pueblo, showing a modern idea of vernacular architecture, and the painting in the middle is by George O'Keeffe. This modernist painting was done in the 20s in a similar time frame when Sylvanus Morley and company were inventing the Santa Fe style, a romantic regionalism synthesizing the vernacular, the Beaux-Arts, romantic traditions, and rejecting the modern, instead embracing what they saw as real American architecture. They were visionaries and predated Meem's arrival. Civic involvement was expected to preserve and educate and develop, such as the Women's Board of Trade and the Chamber of Commerce. The Palace, do you want me to stop? No. The Palace of the Governors, perhaps the most important building at the time, was remodeled into the proper new old Santa Fe style. And surrounding Santa Fe were the pueblos. Of the Puye cliff dwellings near Santa Clara, Edgar Lee Hewitt said, "Clear out as much as possible and make a show ruin of it." All in the defense from a devastating wave of commonplace modernism which overwhelmed artist expression in New Mexico after the American occupation. This is another image of my great-grandfathers from 1914 of the Native American dancers at the plaza in front of the Palace of the Governors, both of the dancer and the people watching the dancer. Santa Fe's survival depended and still depends on the tourist experience of a southwestern center to promote and preserve the city's image and cultural traditions. So this is the first Santa Fe style building, which was done in Colorado in 1908 by the architects Rapp and Rapp for the Colorado Supply Company in Morley, Colorado. Credit apparently goes to the owner of the company for the idea that his warehouse building should look like a church. Notably, the Spanish colonial church at Acoma Pueblo, San Esteban del Rey. The projecting vigas, the cross pieces, the two towers, the inset portals, the eroding adobe battered walls, all of the elements were here by 1908. Rapp and Rapp also worked in Santa Fe, designing the first Santa Fe style building, also a warehouse, the Gross Kelly warehouse. It looks like a church, and they designed the La Fonda with many characteristic adobe details. The former post office by an unnamed architect that worked for the United States Treasury was also an early Santa Fe style building built across the street from the cathedral, now the Basilica. This is the Museum of New Mexico, built for the function of promoting local artists by having an open call to all local artists. The museum recently celebrated its 100th anniversary, and Paul Weideman at the Santa Fe New Mexican wrote an article about the history and showed us these precedents of the building. They were the New Mexico building at the Panama, California exhibition in San Diego, which itself was based on the Rapp and Rapp design for Morley Company, the Mission Church at the Laguna Pueblo, and the two on the right are of the Acoma Pueblo San Esteban del Rey Mission. The museum building represents the ultimate in Santa Fe style, even now, and this was the building Meem saw on a flyer, thank you, and what it looked like when he arrived. The stage was set for Meem. The Santa Fe style had been defined by men and women who would later become his friends and compatriots. Ultimately, he became the most prolific Santa Fe style architect and perhaps the most eloquent. This is St. Vincent's Hospital in downtown Santa Fe. It was an addition to Marion Hall, which at the time was run and owned by the Order of Nuns. It was, and this is the aerial view with the cathedral on the upper right. This building is another example of Meem's use of territorial revival for institutional buildings, and it's also a painted brick building. It's remarkable because it's not only functional, using the latest thinking for hospitals where the nurses are in the center of the building, but at the height of his career, he solved these issues in such a facile way for the site he was given. He not only created a car entry, but also a pedestrian entry on East Palace. He took advantage of the sloping site to put the emergency arrival below, where there was more room for parking, and still managed to attach a new building to a very old building. He continued using ecclesiastical architecture. This is a pared-down territorial revival structure with brick parapets, turned wood balconies, pediments over some of the windows, using brick as the wall construction. He banded the windows together with a frieze made of the bricks, using shadows made by the windowsills to further expose the material. Note the tower and the cross at the top, recently restored by the Drury Hotel. This shows the cruciform plan working out the details of arrival. The lower left is the territorial Greek revival detail of the pedestrian entrance on Palace Avenue. Using the architectural idea, the closer one gets to the detail, the more detail there is. And on the right is the sketch showing the idea of the stepped massing and tower. In his words, as a contemporary regional architect, design must conform to all requirements of modern usage, but in interpreting these requirements, elevation and ornamentation are consciously composed of symbolic forms to provide an additional emotional or spiritual value. It is for these reasons the walls are slightly battered and the bricks on parapets are sometimes clipped to accentuate the curve of contoured outline. This is the plan for the plaza from 1930. design idiom is used citywide. So in 1930, Meem had the idea of rebuilding all of the portals around the plaza in Santa Fe style, eliminating the buildings between the plaza and the cathedral to restore the plaza to its original size, and also removing the Soldiers Monument to a location on the state capitol grounds, reclaiming the center of the plaza for the cultural activities. Sort of controversial now, but cultural activities of the citizens of Santa Fe. Meem sat on the planning commission that created the 57 historic ordinance, the first of its kind in the United States. Because of the desire to protect the unique aspects of the age-old Indian and Hispanic culture and to revive those elements which had for a time appeared to have been in danger of being overwhelmed by the changes brought about by rapid economic change, especially the railroad and the population explosion of newcomers from other parts of the United States. In the purpose section of the ordinance, it states, "It is deemed essential by the governing body that the qualities relating to the history of Santa Fe and a harmonious outward appearance, which preserves property values and attracts tourists and residents alike, be preserved. Some of these qualities being the continued existence and preservation of historical areas and buildings, continued construction of buildings in the historic styles, and a general harmony as to style, form, color, proportion, texture, and material between buildings of historic design and those of modern design." In his own words, in 53, he says, "It may be said that any style is regional that employs suitable available materials adapted to the climate and to local requirements of living and is expressive of certain spiritual values and conscious recollection of history and joy in evocative forms and elements, not necessarily found in a strict interpretation of the maxim, form follows function." This is a photograph of the plaza, which was and still is our most important civic and public space. Notice the harmonious appearance, a place to walk, safe from the elements. The plaza was remodeled in 67 and 74, reflecting the community's pride in its past. Deeply involved with remodeling of the plaza, he donated his designs for improvement, including surrounding buildings and sidewalks. Again, in his own words, "This is done not necessarily to imitate adobe, but to recall by means of a conventionalized symbolic form the heritage of a building or the characteristic shapes of the landscape. For this reason, we recall the color of the earth and ornamental detail utilizing Indian and Spanish motifs. The new construction should not attempt to duplicate the old, but should be in scale and harmony with it while reflecting its own time." I'd also like to add, John and Faith Meem together took on voluntary acceptance of the responsibility to further the civic life of the community, in the words of Myra Ellen Jenkins, a noted Santa Fe historian. The historic preservation of sites, buildings, objects, and even village and street patterns, which are part of our national patrimony, have now become an accepted national and state and local program. It was not always so. Meem joined the Capital Planning Commission because he thought that the new plans for the development in Santa Fe should not interfere with the antiquities and character of the neighborhood around the Capitol, which residents hoped would develop into an outstanding civic center and tourist attraction. This is in harmony with portals in front of the Santa Plaza and the Shed Restaurant, where the portals are very functional. There are no corbels, very pared down, but still in the same idiom of vernacular architecture. And this is Meem's remodel of the First National Bank facade into a recessed facade with fake corbels from the 50s. This became the Levine's department store. We're sort of going to do a walk around the plaza as it is today. The Palace of the Governors on the left, the Catron Building, which is an Italianate architecture, now painted brown. Alongside the remodeled First National Bank building, and the La Fonda in the background, and the portals extend all the way around the plaza. This is Meem's sketch of what they should look like, in some cases covering over the old Victorian details, or removing them altogether and adding fake vigas as seen at the top, the building in the foreground. This is the tourist experience in the 50s, much like what it is today, but with smaller signs. We have added a sign ordinance to keep it harmonious, of course. It was started in 1912. We reiterated it, the ordinance in 57, 88, and 97. We keep reaffirming that yes, we want to be a tourist town, counterfeit or not, it's what we are. These are more images of the Plaza Portals providing wonderful shade. The plaza is a wonderful urban setting and now very unusual in the United States. We must thank the fathers of this movement from 1912 for what we are today. This is Meem's vision of the new First National Bank and what it is today. And this is another legacy of the homogeneous and harmonious architecture in Santa Fe. There's a visual quietness that I think people enjoy for the most part. We joke that if it's brown and round, it's okay, but it is conducive to the light in Santa Fe and does contribute to the soft ambiance of Santa Fe. I am including the Santa Fe Community Convention Center to illustrate the idea of using modern materials to achieve the vernacular style in 2008. We battered the walls with a steel frame and covered them with tapered insulation and then stucco cement. So you can't tell the difference whether it's an adobe building or not an adobe building. It does follow, however, the urban design traditions in Spanish colonial towns with a wonderful courtyard and covered connections from one street to another. It does have stepped massing in the fireplaces and beautiful interior appointments. It's counterfeit, but it's also our heritage. Another legacy from Meem, the new old Santa Fe style, Pueblo and Spanish construction, is that we still use adobe today and other materials such as straw bale, pumicecrete, rammed earth. There's rostra, there's now also a masonry product called AEC. But we still think about material in the same way and how to build in a modern way with an ancient material. And for that reason alone, it's very satisfying for me to be an architect in Santa Fe.